In the endless grasslands of the Central Asian steppe where the horizon stretched so far it looked like the sky had fallen onto the earth, and empire was being forged not in stone, not in gold, but in bone, blood, and dust. Before the world knew their name, before kingdoms trembled at their approach, the Mongol horsemen were simply nomads, chasing the rhythms of the seasons. Yet from these wandering tribes rose warriors so fast, so disciplined, and so unimaginably lethal that they reshaped continents. To understand how they conquered empires in the time it took others merely to plan a siege, you must imagine the steppe itself, a world without walls, without borders, without shelter. Winters so cruel that entire herds froze standing. Summers so dry that the ground cracked like broken pottery. In this harsh world, only the strongest survived, and the Mongols did more than survive. They thrived. Children learned to ride before they learned to walk. Boys could fire arrows with deadly precision by the age of 5. Every child grew up gripping the mane of a horse with one hand and a bow with the other. This was not a culture that prepared for war. It was war. But raw skill alone does not build an empire. What transformed these scattered nomads into a storm capable of sweeping across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe was a single-man Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan. Born into poverty, hunted by enemies, abandoned by allies, Temujin understood fear long before he learned power, and perhaps that is what made him so unstoppable. He knew the world had no mercy to offer, so he would offer none in return. When he united the Mongol tribes, he created something no steppe people had ever achieved before: a single military machine, a force bound, not by blood, but by loyalty, discipline, and ruthless justice. Every warrior was commanded by a leader he trusted. Every leader answered directly to someone above him. Orders flowed like water through his army, clean and precise. There was no confusion, no hesitation, no waste. In a world where armies moved like lumbering beasts, the Mongols moved like lightning. What made them so fast? Everything. First, their horses. The Mongol horse was small, rugged, and tireless. Each warrior rode with 5 or 6 horses and switched between them during battle, keeping them fresh, while European knights rode war horses that required food, care, and stables. Mongol horses grazed freely and survived on almost nothing. A Mongol army could move 100 miles in a single day, crossing deserts, mountains, and frozen rivers with no supply wagons. They carried dried meat tied beneath their saddles, which softened from the horse's sweat and body heat. They drank fermented mare's milk, and when desperate, they cut a small vein in their horse's neck to drink warm blood enough to stay alive and keep moving. No army in history had ever been so efficient. Their next secret was communication. The Mongols used a relay system of riders, each capable of galloping at full speed from station to station. Messages that took weeks for other empires traveled in hours across Mongol territory. In battle, they used flags, horns, and drums to coordinate movements with unbelievable precision. Soldiers could change formations instantly, splitting and reforming like a school of fish. This gave birth to their deadliest tactic, the feigned retreat. When Mongol horsemen pretended to flee, their enemies believed victory was at hand. Armies chased them, cheering, breaking formation in excitement. And then, at the perfect moment, the Mongols turned. In a roar of hooves and arrows, they encircled their pursuers and slaughtered them. Kingdom after kingdom fell for this trap. Even the proudest generals, trained for decades, could not resist the promise of an easy win. The Mongols knew this weakness, Wieland. They exploited it again and again. But their power did not come only from speed or discipline. It came from fear. Genghis Khan understood human psychology better than any king. He did not conquer cities one by one. He conquered them in the minds of their rulers long before he arrived. Word spread quickly. Resist the Mongols, and your city would be burned to the ground. Every inhabitant executed. No mercy given. Surrender, and you would live pay tribute. Open your gates, and the Mongols would pass through like a shadow. Fear saved them thousands of battles, and fear broke empires faster than weapons ever could. When Mongol scouts reached a city, The population already trembled. Some surrendered immediately, others hesitated and paid the price. Their siege technology, often ignored, was astonishing. The Mongols were masters of mobility, but they were also masters of adaptation. When they needed engineers, they captured the best from China, Persia, and the Middle East. These engineers built catapults, trebuchets, firebombs, and even early gunpowder weapons for the Mongols. Imagine the speed. An army that could appear in days with cavalry, then transform into a fully equipped siege force the next week. That was the Mongol way. They fought as though the world belonged to them. They recorded everything, too. Mongol generals carried maps, scouts measured distances, and spies infiltrated cities long before the army arrived. Every river crossing, every valley, every mountain pass, nothing was left to chance. Their intelligence network was vast, stretching across continents. Before each invasion, they knew the enemy's strengths, weaknesses, population, terrain, and even internal conflicts. No empire in history combined planning, speed, and brutality like this. When the Mongols swept westward, the great Khwarezm Empire fell in months. When they marched toward Russia, entire principalities were crushed in weeks. When they rode into Europe, they defeated armies 10 times their size, not through sheer force, but through coordination, mobility, and fear. Every Mongol horseman was trained to fight independently, retreat smoothly, and strike with precision. They did not rely on heavy armor, they relied on intelligence, flexibility, and endurance. This is how empires crumbled before them. The Mongols arrived not like an army, but like a storm, silent at first, then violent and unstoppable. Cities that had stood for centuries vanished. Kingdoms that boasted ancient histories collapsed. Roads became highways of conquest, and borders evaporated. And yet, for all their destruction, the Mongols also connected the world. They created trade routes that linked Europe to Asia. They encouraged merchants, scholars, and travelers. They brought stability to lands that had known decades of war. In their own harsh and unforgiving way, they shaped the world we live in. The Mongol horsemen conquered not because they were stronger, but because they were faster, smarter, and more adaptable than any empire they faced. Their legacy is written across continents, from China to Hungary, from Siberia to India. It is carved into the ruins of fallen kingdoms and preserved in the legends of survivors. And even today, centuries later, militaries around the world study the strategies of Genghis Khan, because no army before or after has ever conquered so much, so quickly, with so few. This is how the Mongol horsemen defeated empires in days, not years. This is how thunder rode on horseback across the world.